Empress Valara ruled over the Dominion, one of the most feared empires in the galaxy. Her word could end civilizations. Her fleets controlled 1,000 star systems. But tonight, none of that power mattered. Tonight, she was nobody. Just another tired worker in faded gray coveralls, walking the cold metal corridors of a forgotten station at the edge of known space. The synthetic skin covering her shimmering scales itched constantly. It was an expensive disguise, custom-made to hide her royal heritage, but comfort had been sacrificed for authenticity. She looked like any other laborer finishing a long shift. Exhausted, unremarkable, invisible. That's exactly what she needed to be. Station Kepler. 7 wasn't much to look at. The outpost had seen better days, probably decades ago. Rust stains marked the walls. The air recyclers hummed with a worrying rattle. Half the light panels were burned out, leaving entire sections in shadow. It was the kind of place that Dominion inspectors would condemn without a second thought. Yet somehow, this rundown human station functioned better than facilities, with 100 times its budget. That impossibility had brought Valara here. For months, reports had crossed her desk that made no sense. Human stations maintaining ancient equipment that should have failed years ago. Human mechanics keeping starships operational without proper galactic technology. Human engineers solving problems that stumped certified specialists from advanced species. The galactic consensus had always dismissed humans as primitive, barely capable of understanding basic technology, dependent on the charity of more advanced civilizations just to survive in space. Every species believed this. Even Valara had believed it, but the numbers told a different story. Human facilities had fewer critical system failures. Their ships, though ancient and ugly, stayed in service longer. Their solutions, though unconventional, somehow worked better than textbook approaches. Valara needed to understand why. So she had come here in secret, without guards or advisors, to see the truth with her own eyes. The station's night cycle had begun hours ago. Most workers had gone to their quarters to sleep. The corridors were empty except for the occasional maintenance drone rolling past on its program route. Her footsteps echoed on the deck plating, the sound lonely in the silence. She was about to return to her temporary quarters when she saw it. Light, a thin golden line glowing beneath a hangar bay door that should have been sealed in dark. Someone was working late, very late. Curiosity pulled her forward. The door's lock panel showed green, disengaged. She pressed a release, and the door slid open just enough for her to slip inside. The hangar was massive, built to service multiple cargo vessels simultaneously. But only one ship occupied the space now. It was an old freighter, the kind that made Dominion engineers wince. Mismatched hull panels showed where repairs had been made with whatever materials were available. Scorch marks from atmospheric entries that had been too close for comfort. Welds that looked hand-done rather than precision-fabricated. It was ugly. It was old. By all rights, it should have been scrap metal decades ago. But it was still flying, still hauling cargo across the stars. The light Valara had seen came from beneath the ship. Someone lay on a mechanic's creeper, working on the vessel's underside. She moved closer, her footsteps silent, and got a better look. A human man. Young, maybe 30 standard years. He wore oil-stained coveralls and work boots that had seen serious use. One of his arms stretched up into the ship's exposed machinery, while his other hand held a simple flashlight. Not a modern glow panel or a floating work light. Just a basic chemical battery flashlight that threw harsh shadows across his workspace. Around him on the hangar floor lay chaos that somehow had order. Papers covered in hand-drawn diagrams and mathematical formulas. Technical manuals so old their pages were yellowed and torn. Tools that looked primitive by galactic standards, but were clearly well-maintained and organized within easy reach. Empty coffee containers that suggested he'd been here for hours. The human muttered to himself as he worked, a steady stream of numbers and technical terms. Valara listened and felt her breath catch. He was rewiring a fusion regulator. That component was one of the most complex systems in any starship. It required AI assistance to calibrate properly. It required years of specialized training to understand. It required diagnostic equipment worth more than this entire hangar bay. This human was doing it by hand, using a flashlight and basic tools. His movements showed confidence, not the fumbling hesitation of someone guessing. He pulled out a damaged coupling, examined it under his flashlight beam, then set it aside. But instead of reaching for a replacement part, he did something that made Velara forget to breathe. He started building a new coupling from scrap metal. His hands moved steadily, cutting and shaping pieces from a bin of discarded parts. He wasn't following any standard design that Velara recognized. He was improvising, creating something new, compensating for inferior materials through pure engineering creativity. His lips kept moving through calculations the entire time, complex mathematics that our own engineers would need computer assistance to perform. He was doing it in his head, while his hands built impossible solutions from garbage. This wasn't how things worked in the civilized galaxy. Every species Velara knew followed established protocols. They used standardized parts manufactured to exact specifications. They relied on advanced fabrication technology and inherited knowledge passed down through generations of specialists. But this human was different. He wasn't following protocols. He was thinking, understanding, creating. A conduit suddenly sparked, bright in the hangar's dimness. The human swore, a mild curse, and pulled himself out from under the ship. Velara expected frustration, expected him to give up or call for help. Instead, he grabbed one of his notebooks and started flipping through pages of handwritten notes. He found what he was looking for and nodded to himself. Wrong voltage tolerance, he said to the empty air. Need to recalculate the resistance ratio. Stupid mistake. He was learning from his failure, adjusting his approach. Trying again. That's when he noticed her. The human rolled his creeper out from under the ship and looked directly at Velara. She froze, caught watching him work. She expected suspicion, maybe alarm at finding a stranger in his workspace. Instead, he smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Hey there," he said, his tone friendly and casual. "You're new, right? Haven't seen you around before." He gestured to his tool collection. "Could you pass me that torque wrench?" "The big one." Third from the left. Velara's hand moved automatically. She picked up the heavy tool and handed it to him. He took it with a grateful nod. "Thanks. I'm Jake, by the way, Jake Miller." He didn't wait for her to introduce herself, already sliding back under the ship. "Working late shift too, huh? This old girl needs her fusion regulator rebuilt, and the owner needs her flying by next week. Can't afford a new regulator. So I'm making do." His voice echoed slightly from beneath the ship's hull. Then he said something that surprised her even more. "Want to watch? It's actually pretty interesting once you understand what's happening. I can explain it if you want." And just like that, Jake began teaching her. He talked about energy flow patterns and quantum field dynamics. He showed her his notebooks, filled with observations and theories he developed through experimentation. He explained how he was learning alien engineering through trial and error, and something he called first principles thinking. "See, the official manuals are fine for basic operations," Jake said, his enthusiasm clear in his voice. "But they just tell you what buttons to push. They don't explain the underlying principles. If you understand why something works the way it does, you can figure out solutions the manual writers never imagined. You can adapt, improvise, make things work even when you don't have the right parts." Velara stood there listening, her mind racing with implications. The galactic consensus had always treated humans as primitive charity cases, barely capable of understanding advanced technology, dependent on superior species for survival. But Jake Miller wasn't using borrowed technology. He was understanding it, mastering it, improving it. With nothing but a flashlight, some scrap metal, and raw determination, he was doing what Dominion engineers claimed was impossible. 2 hours later, Velara slipped out of the hangar. Her disguise remained intact. Jake had never questioned her presence or asked her name. To him, she was just another worker, someone curious about his work. But everything had changed for Velara. One thought consumed her mind. What if humanity had been hiding its true potential all along? What if the galaxy's most underestimated species was actually its most innovative? She would return tomorrow night. She needed to know more. She needed to understand if Jake Miller was extraordinary, or if every human possessed this remarkable ability to adapt and overcome. The answer would change everything. Villara returned the next night, and the night after that, and the one after that. For 7 straight nights, she slipped into that hangar bay wearing her disguise as Vera, a supply clerk nobody paid attention to. And every single night, Jake was there, working under that same dim flashlight, tackling repairs that should have been impossible. The first night, he was rebuilding a navigation computer from 3 broken units. The second night, he was hand-fabricating replacement parts for a life support system. The third night, he was rewiring a power distribution network that had been declared beyond repair. Each project seemed more impossible than the last, yet Jake approached them all with the same calm confidence and infectious enthusiasm. Villara learned things that shocked her. Jake had never received formal training. None of the humans on this station had. The galactic consensus provided almost no technical education to human colonies. They were given basic operation manuals and told to call certified technicians when things broke. But certified technicians charge fees that humans could rarely afford, and response times at frontier stations could be weeks or months. So humans had been forced to figure everything out themselves, through trial and error, through experimentation and observation, through countless failures that became lessons. Jake's notebooks told the story. Thousands of pages filled with handwritten observations, sketches, calculations, and theories. He had been documenting everything he learned about galactic technology for years. Not just how to fix things, but why they worked the way they did. One night, as Jake worked on a plasma coil, Villara picked up one of his notebooks and flipped through it. The pages showed his evolution as an engineer. Early entries were simple observations and questions. Later entries contained complex theories and innovative solutions that professional engineers would find impressive. The manuals are frustrating, Jake said, noticing her reading. They tell you what buttons to push and what warning lights mean, but they never explain the actual principles. It's like they don't want you to really understand. He pulled himself out from under the ship and sat up, wiping grease from his hands. I needed to know why things worked, he continued. Because if you understand the why, you can fix problems even when you don't have the right parts or the right tools. You can adapt. That's what humans are good at, adapting. Their conversations grew deeper each night. Jake started noticing that Vera asked unusually smart questions. Questions that showed real understanding of complex engineering concepts. He never said anything directly, but Villara could tell he was curious about her background. She had to be more careful. But some nights, her expertise slipped through. It happened when Jake was struggling with a quantum field matrix alignment. He had been working on the same problem for 3 weeks, trying dozens of different approaches. Nothing worked quite right. The fields kept destabilizing at high power levels. Villara was watching him work, and she saw the problem immediately. It was a phase synchronization issue, something every Dominion engineering student learned in their first year. Jake's approach was clever, but missed a key principle about harmonic resonance. Before she could stop herself, the words came out. The secondary field needs to lead the primary by 0.03 cycles, not lag behind it. You're creating destructive interference. Jake froze. He turned to look at her, his eyes wide. What did you just say? Villara's heart raced. She had made a mistake, but there was no taking it back now. The phase timing, she said more carefully. I think I overheard some engineers talking about it once. Something about leading versus lagging in quantum field applications. Jake stared at her for a long moment, then suddenly grabbed his notebook and started writing frantically. He ran calculations, cross-referenced his previous attempts, then let out a laugh of pure joy. That's it. That's what I've been missing. The phase relationship. He looked at Vera with something like, "Oh, I've been stuck on this for 3 weeks. How did you know?" "I heard it somewhere," Villara said weakly. "You heard it somewhere," Jake repeated, but he was smiling. "Vera, whoever you really are, thank you. Seriously, thank you." He didn't push for more answers. Instead, he dove back into his work, implementing the correction with renewed energy. And it worked. The quantum field stabilized perfectly. After that night, something changed between them. An unspoken partnership formed. Jake would explain his human approaches to problem solving, what he called iterative design, learning from failure and cross-disciplinary thinking. He showed her how humans borrowed ideas from completely unrelated fields and combined them in unexpected ways. In return, Valara carefully offered insights, always disguised as things she had overheard or read somewhere. She helped him understand galactic engineering principles without revealing her true identity or expertise. Through Jake, Valara discovered something that shook her understanding of the galaxy. Humans weren't primitive at all. They were adaptive in ways her own species had forgotten how to be. The Dominion and other advanced civilizations relied on inherited knowledge, established protocols, and rigid procedures. They did things a certain way, because that's how they had always been done. But humans questioned everything. They experimented. They combined old ideas in new ways. They learned from every failure. Jake didn't just memorize solutions from manuals. He understood underlying principles and created entirely new approaches. She watched him help other station residents, and that impressed her even more. A family's life support system failed, and Jake fixed it using parts from their children's toys and a heating element from a broken food warmer. A merchant needed a radiation shield for his cargo bay, and Jake built one using human fusion containment principles adapted from old Earth research papers. But Jake never kept his knowledge to himself. He taught others his methods. He showed them how to think through problems. He gave them confidence to try repairs themselves instead of always calling for help. Then, 8 days after Valara first found Jake in that hangar, disaster struck the entire station. The main water reclamation system failed. Not a minor malfunction. A complete catastrophic failure that left the central processing unit melted and destroyed. The station administrator immediately called for Dominion technicians. They arrived within hours, a team of certified engineers with impressive credentials and expensive diagnostic equipment. Valara watched from a distance as they assessed the damage. She recognized the team leader, a senior engineer named Thros who had worked on Dominion facilities for 20 years. After 2 hours of examination, Thros delivered his verdict to the desperate administrator. Complete system replacement required. 6 weeks minimum for parts delivery and installation. Cost estimate, 200,000 credits. The administrator went pale. 6 weeks? We have water reserves for 3 days. Maybe 4 if we ration strictly. Then I suggest you begin evacuation procedures. Thros said coldly. This system cannot be repaired, only replaced. A crowd had gathered, station residents listening in growing panic. Evacuation meant losing their homes, their businesses, everything they had built. That's when Jake pushed through the crowd. "Let me look at it," he said. Thros turned to him with an expression of contempt. "And who are you?" "Jake Miller. I'm a mechanic here. I've fixed water systems before." Thros actually laughed. "This is a Dominion Class 7 reclamation system. It requires Imperial Certification Level 7 to even access the control interface. I sincerely doubt any human possesses such credentials." "I don't have the certification," Jake admitted, "but I know I can fix it." "Impossible. The system is destroyed beyond repair." The administrator looked between them. Desperate hope fighting with doubt. Finally, he made a decision. "Let him try. We got nothing to lose." Thros's expression hardened. "I will not be held responsible for any additional damage caused by unauthorized tampering." "Noted," the administrator said. "Jake, it's yours." Jake nodded and headed toward the reclamation facility. Valara followed at a distance, torn between her pride as a Dominion Empress and her growing respect for human ingenuity. Jake rolled up his sleeves and went to work, and Valara watched, wondering if she was about to witness another miracle or the moment when human determination finally met a wall it couldn't climb. Jake didn't sleep for 48 hours straight. Valara watched him work through both day cycles and night cycles, fueled by nothing but coffee and stubborn determination. The reclamation facility became his workshop, his laboratory, his battlefield. The first thing Jake it surprised everyone. He didn't try to fix the destroyed system. He walked around the entire facility for 3 hours, just looking, examining, taking notes. He opened access panels that hadn't been touched in years. He traced pipe networks through crawl spaces. He studied how water flowed through the station's entire infrastructure. What's he doing? Thros asked with contempt. That's not even the damaged section. But Villara understood. Jake was learning the whole system, not just the broken part, but how everything connected together. He was seeing the big picture. Then Jake started scavenging. He went through the station storage areas and salvage yards, pulling components from retired equipment, a filtration unit from an old agriculture bay, pressure regulators from a decommissioned shuttle, chemical processors from 3 different systems that had been declared incompatible with each other. He laid everything out in the reclamation facility like puzzle pieces. "This is insane," one of Thros's assistants whispered. "Those components weren't designed to work together." "That's because he's not using them the way they were designed," Villara said quietly. She was beginning to understand Jake's plan, and it was brilliant. Jake worked with intense focus. He cut apart components and recombined them in ways that made Dominion engineers shake their heads. He welded connections that shouldn't exist. He rerouted flows and patterns that violated every standard protocol. But there was method in what looked like madness. Jake was applying human hydroponics techniques, systems Earth colonists had developed for growing food in space. He was using biological filtration concepts that human scientists had pioneered when they had no access to advanced galactic technology. He was redesigning the core catalyzer using human chemical engineering principles that took a completely different approach than Dominion methods. 30 hours into the repair, Thros tried to shut down the work. "This is a violation of safety regulations. I'm ordering this stopped immediately." The station administrator stepped between them. "He's not done yet. Let him finish. You're risking everyone's lives." "We're already out of water," the administrator shot back. "My people are rationing the last reserves. Let him work." Jake never stopped through any of this. His hands kept moving, steady despite exhaustion. His eyes stayed focused even as they grew bloodshot and red. 42 hours in, he started the final connections. Villara held her breath as Jake powered up each section, testing and adjusting as he went. The system came to life with sounds that were different from the original, rougher, less refined. But it worked. Water began flowing through the reclamation processors. Clean, pure water that met every safety standard. Jake ran test after test, checking quality, monitoring flow rates, measuring efficiency. The system wasn't just working. It was working better than before. 30% less power consumption, Jake announced, reading from his handheld monitor. And processing capacity is actually up by about 15%. The redundant pathways. I added mean if one section fails. The system keeps running while you repair it. The crowd that had gathered erupted in cheers. People hugged each other, crying with relief. The station was saved. But Commander Thros was furious, his face dark with rage. "This is completely unacceptable," he shouted over the celebration. "These modifications violate every safety protocol. They violate Imperial patent law. This entire system must be shut down immediately and replaced with proper Dominion equipment." The station administrator stared at him in disbelief. "We have water. People aren't going to die. Your solution was 6 weeks away. That's irrelevant. Imperial law is clear about unauthorized modifications to certified systems. I'm reporting this station for allowing an uncertified human to tamper with Imperial property. There will be consequences." Thros and his team stormed out, leaving tension in their wake. The celebration died down as people realized what this meant. Imperial bureaucracy could shut them down even with a working system. They could face massive fines. The station could be closed. But they had water. They had survived. For now, that had to be enough. That night, Villara found Jake sitting alone in the hangar where she'd first discovered him. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his clothes stained with grease and coolant. She couldn't maintain the pretense anymore. She sat down beside him and let the disguise fall away. The synthetic skin dissolved, revealing her shimmering scales. Her posture changed, carrying the weight of authority she'd hidden for weeks. "I need to tell you the truth," she said. "My name is Velara. I'm the Empress of the Dominion." She expected shock, fear, maybe anger at the deception. Instead, Jake just looked at her with tired curiosity. An Empress sneaking around a frontier station in disguise. That's quite a story. Why? Velara appreciated his directness. No bowing, no groveling, just honest question deserving honest answer. "Because nothing made sense," she said. "Human stations have better maintenance records than Imperial facilities with 10 times the resources and 100 times the budget. Human ships stay operational decades, longer than they should. Human engineers solve problems that stump our certified specialists. I needed to understand why." Jake smiled, a weary but genuine expression. "The answer's pretty simple. We can't afford to call for help every time something breaks. Help costs money we don't have, and it takes time we can't spare. So we learn to think for ourselves, to understand how things actually work, not just how we're told they work." "You're teaching my empire a lesson we forgot," Velara said. She made a decision that would change both their lives. "Come with me to the throne world. Teach my engineers what you know, not as some subordinate brought in to show off, as an equal, as someone who has knowledge we desperately need." Jake studied her face, looking for deception or ulterior motives. "I'll just be a token human. My ideas will be dismissed or stolen. I've seen how the galaxy treats us." "Then I'll make you an offer you can't refuse," Velara said. She leaned forward, her voice intense. "I'll fund the first human engineering academy. Imperial resources, human instructors, teaching human methods. I'll push the galactic consensus to recognize human certifications as valid throughout civilized space. I'll change the system that's kept humanity down." She paused, letting that sink in. "In exchange, you teach at the Imperial Academy. You prove to the galaxy's best engineers that human ingenuity isn't primitive. It's revolutionary. You show them that humanity deserves respect, not charity." Jake was quiet for a long moment. It was risky for both of them. If he failed, humanity would look incompetent. If he succeeded, he'd challenge the entire galactic hierarchy and make powerful enemies. Finally, Jake extended his hand, that same easy confidence she'd seen from the beginning. "Deal." Velara shook his hand, and in that moment, the future of the galaxy shifted. Neither of them knew it yet, but this partnership would transform everything. The journey was just beginning. The journey to the throne world took 3 weeks aboard an Imperial transport. 3 weeks that changed everything between Velara and Jake. She had expected him to be overwhelmed by Imperial technology. The transport ship was a masterpiece of Dominion engineering, centuries ahead of anything humans had built, systems that should have intimidated him or filled him with awe. Instead, Jake treated the ship like a puzzle waiting to be solved. He spent his days exploring every section the crew allowed him access to. He asked questions constantly, filling notebook after notebook with observations. But these weren't the questions of someone trying to memorize facts. Jake questioned assumptions. He challenged design choices. He sketched alternative approaches in the margins of his pages. "Why do you route power conduits through 17 junction points?" he asked one evening over dinner. "You're losing efficiency with every connection. Humans would use maybe 5 junctions max. Because it provides redundancy," Velara explained. "If one junction fails, power reroutes automatically. But you're sacrificing 12% efficiency for redundancy you rarely need," Jay countered. He pulled out his notebook and showed her calculations. "Look, if you redesign the junction architecture using a hub-and-spoke model instead of serial connections, you maintain redundancy while cutting power loss by half." He was right. Velara could see it in his math. The Dominion had designed power systems this way for centuries, and nobody had questioned whether there might be a better approach. Jake treated her not as an empress, but as a fellow engineer. They debated design philosophy during meals. They argued about the merits of different approaches late into the night cycles. And sometimes, Jake admitted when Imperial methods were superior to human ones. "Your medical systems are incredible. he said one day after visiting the ship's medical bay. The cellular regeneration technology is decades beyond anything humans have, maybe centuries. I don't even know where we'd start trying to develop something like that. But even then, he explained exactly why the Imperial approach worked better, breaking down principles until he understood them completely. The crew didn't know what to make of him. A human who spoke to the Empress as an equal, who questioned Imperial engineering openly. It was unprecedented. Velara found herself looking forward to their conversations. Jake saw the galaxy differently than anyone she'd ever met. Where Dominion engineers saw perfection in tradition, Jake saw opportunities for improvement. Where her people saw established protocols, Jake saw starting points for innovation. When they finally arrived at the throne world, reality crashed down on them both. The Imperial court was scandalized. Word had spread that Empress Velara was bringing a human as an honored guest, not as a servant or curiosity, but as someone she claimed had important knowledge to share. The reaction was immediate and hostile. "This is an insult to the Dominion," one admiral declared publicly. "Humans are barely capable of understanding basic technology, let alone teaching us anything." "The Empress has been deceived," a senior counselor announced. "Or worse, she's lost her judgment entirely." The political attacks came from every direction. Velara's reforms were condemned before they even began. Her reputation, built over years of careful rule, suddenly stood on shaky ground. But nobody was more hostile than High Fabricator Kelrin, the chief Imperial engineer. He had held that position for 30 years, overseeing every major technological project in the Dominion. His authority was absolute in all matters of engineering, and Jake represented a direct challenge to everything Kelrin believed. "If this human has such remarkable abilities," Kelrin announced to the assembled court, "then let him prove it. I propose a public demonstration." Velara felt ice in her stomach. This was a trap. She could see it clearly. "What kind of demonstration?" she asked carefully. Kelrin smiled, and it wasn't kind. "Something simple. We'll present him with a failing component that requires calibration. If he can repair it using his supposed human ingenuity, then perhaps he has something to teach us after all." The court murmured with interest. This would be entertainment for them, watching a human fail publicly. "And if he succeeds?" Velara asked. "Then I will personally sponsor his teaching position at the Imperial Academy," Kelrin said. "But when he fails, these foolish reforms end immediately, and humanity remains where it belongs, under our supervision, not pretending to be our equals." Jake had been standing quietly through all of this. Now he stepped forward. "I accept," he said simply. The demonstration was scheduled for the next day in the Grand Hall, where the entire Imperial Court could watch. Kelrin personally selected the challenge. They brought out a quantum resonance chamber from an Imperial dreadnought. The device was the size of a large trunk, covered in access panels and connection ports. Its internal systems glowed with failing energy patterns visible through transparent sections. This chamber regulates quantum field harmonics for faster-than-light travel, Kelrin explained to the assembled court. It requires calibration by master fabricators using specialized equipment worth millions of credits. The calibration process typically takes 8 hours with a full team. He turned to Jake with barely concealed contempt. "You have 4 hours, and you may use only basic tools." He gestured to a small kit of simple hand tools. No computers, no diagnostic equipment, no assistants. The court filled with nobles, military officers, and senior engineers. Everyone who mattered in the Dominion had come to watch the human fail. The gallery seats were packed. Even standing room was filled. Velara stood to the side, maintaining her composure while her mind raced. She realized she might have doomed her own political standing by believing in human potential. If Jake failed here, her authority would be permanently damaged. Jake walked up to the quantum resonance chamber calmly. He didn't look nervous. He circled it slowly, examining it from every angle. He opened access panels and peered inside, studying the internal configuration. Then he started asking questions. "What's the primary failure mode?" he asked Kelrin. "Field collapse at high resonance frequencies." Kelrin answered dismissively. What's the maximum sustainable field strength before collapse? Approximately 63% of design specifications. Jake nodded, making notes. He asked more questions, technical ones that revealed he was thinking about the problem in ways the Imperial engineers didn't expect. He wasn't asking how to fix it the standard way. He was trying to understand why it was failing. After 20 minutes of examination and questions, Jake straightened up. "I need access to your theoretical physics archives," he said. The court erupted in laughter. Even Kelrin chuckled. "To read academic papers? You're wasting time. Human, you have less than 4 hours remaining." But Jake's expression was serious. "I need to check something about quantum field mathematics. Your archives have theoretical research papers, right?" Villara stepped forward. "Give him access." Kelrin shrugged. "Let him waste his time reading. It changes nothing." They brought Jake a data terminal connected to the Imperial archives. The court watched in confusion and amusement as the human sat down and started reading. For 2 solid hours, Jake read physics papers, dense theoretical mathematics that even Imperial engineers found difficult. He took notes, cross-referenced different papers, and seemed completely absorbed. The court grew restless. People whispered and laughed. This was a human genius, reading papers while time ran out. But Villara watched Jake's face and saw something different. She saw concentration, understanding. She saw the moment when something clicked in his mind. Jake stood up and walked back to the quantum resonance chamber. He picked up tools from the basic kit Kelrin had provided, and he went to work that Jake's hands moved with steady confidence. He worked methodically, not rushing despite the time pressure. The court watched in silence now, the laughter dying away as they saw his focus. He wasn't following standard calibration procedures. Imperial engineers calibrated quantum chambers by measuring and adjusting millions of individual parameters, one at a time. It required massive computational power and specialized equipment that cost fortunes. But Jake was doing something completely different. He made a few key measurements with basic instruments. Then he performed calculations on paper, working through complex mathematics by hand. The court watched confused as he used the theoretical physics papers he'd read to predict the optimal configuration without measuring every parameter. After 90 minutes of careful work, Jake closed the final access panel and stepped back. "It's done," he said quietly. Kelrin's expression was skeptical. "Activate it." Jake pressed the power sequence. The quantum resonance chamber hummed to life. Energy patterns flowed through the transparent sections, stable and strong. The readings showed perfect harmony across all frequency ranges. But more than that, it performed 12% more efficiently than Imperial specifications. The court fell silent. Kelrin rushed forward to verify the readings himself. He checked the calibration with his own instruments. He ran diagnostic after diagnostic. Everything was perfect, better than perfect. "How?" Kelrin demanded. "What did you do?" Jake explained patiently. "Imperial calibration is brute force. You measure everything and adjust everything. It works, but it's inefficient. Human physicists, when we couldn't afford massive computers, developed mathematical models that predict optimal configurations from just a few key measurements. It's more elegant, faster, and it revealed something your method misses." He pulled up a display showing the quantum field patterns. "Your calibration process creates friction in the quantum fields. It's baked into your protocols. Nobody notices because that's just how it's always been done. My method, using human mathematical approaches, eliminates that friction entirely." The court erupted into shocked conversation. Some people argued it was impossible. Others demanded to see the calculations. But the evidence was right there, humming softly, working better than any Imperial engineer had achieved. Jake Miller had just proven that human ingenuity could surpass centuries of Dominion engineering tradition. The months that followed were chaos. Jake became the most controversial figure in the entire Dominion. Half the Imperial court despised him as an upstart primitive who threatened the established order. The other half recognized that something remarkable was happening, whether they wanted to admit it or not. Villara appointed Jake as a professor at the Imperial Academy despite fierce opposition. His first classes attracted only a handful of students, mostly young engineers curious about the human who had embarrassed High Fabricator Kelrin. But word spread quickly about what happened in those classes. Jake didn't teach the way Imperial professors taught. He didn't give students procedures to memorize. He didn't provide protocols to follow without understanding. Instead, he taught them to think. "Why does this work?" he would ask, pointing to some established system. "Don't tell me it's because the manual says so. Explain the actual principles. And once you understand principles, ask yourself if there might be a better way." He encouraged questions that Imperial education had always discouraged. He celebrated failures as learning opportunities. He taught students to experiment, to test ideas, to combine concepts from different fields in unexpected ways. In human engineering school, which doesn't really exist yet, Jake said with a smile, we have a saying, fail fast, fail often, fail forward. Every failure teaches you something. The goal isn't to never fail. It's to learn from every failure and never make the same mistake twice. His human method spread like wildfire among younger engineers frustrated with rigid traditions. Students who took Jake's classes started applying his approaches to their regular coursework. They questioned assumptions in other classes. They proposed innovative solutions to old problems. Some traditional professors were outraged, but others, usually the younger ones, started incorporating human methods into their own teaching. The results became impossible to ignore. Ships that Jake's students worked on showed 15% efficiency improvements across the board. Systems designed using human methods lasted longer, required less maintenance, and cost significantly less to build. The evidence was overwhelming. Velara pushed the reforms forward despite fierce resistance from conservative factions. She allocated Imperial funding to establish human technical schools across human colonies. She personally lobbied the Galactic Consensus to recognize human engineering certifications as valid throughout civilized space. Most revolutionary of all, the Imperial Academy officially adopted human methods as part of the core curriculum. Iterative design, first principles thinking, learning from failure, cross-disciplinary innovation. Ideas that humans had developed out of necessity became required learning for the galaxy's elite engineers. Not everyone was pleased. Conservative factions pushed back hard. There were protests, political battles, attempts to discredit Jake and undermine Velara's reforms. But results spoke louder than tradition. Fleet performance improved. Construction costs decreased. Innovation accelerated across the entire Dominion. The numbers didn't lie. 2 years after that night, when Velara first found Jake working under a cargo hauler by flashlight, everything had changed. They stood together on a platform overlooking thousands of people gathered for a historic ceremony, the dedication of the Human Imperial Technical Institute, the first school in galactic history where human and alien engineers would learn together as equals. The building was massive, state-of-the-art, funded by Imperial resources but designed with input from human educators. Thousands of human students had already applied for admission, but just as many Imperial students had applied, eager to learn these revolutionary human methods. The ceremony was long and formal, full of speeches by politicians and dignitaries. But the real moment came when the first class of students walked through the doors, humans and aliens side by side, ready to learn from each other. After the ceremony ended and most of the crowd had dispersed, Velara and Jake found a quiet balcony overlooking the city. "What are you working on now?" Velara asked. Jake grinned, that same enthusiastic expression she remembered from their first meeting. He pulled out his battered notebook, worn from 2 years of constant use, and showed her pages filled with sketches and calculations. "A new type of faster-than-light drive," he said, "based on principles from human quantum mechanics that nobody in the galaxy has really explored. The math suggests we could cut travel time by 30% while using less power. Maybe more if the theory holds up." He looked at her with that familiar spark of curiosity and determination. "Want to help me build it?" Velara, Empress of the Dominion, ruler of 1,000 worlds, smiled and picked up a stylus. "Show me what you got so far." They bent over the notebook together, discussing theories and possibilities, teacher and student, Empress and mechanic, partners in pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The galaxy had always measured progress by technological sophistication, by how advanced the civilization's inherited knowledge had become. But one human with a flashlight had taught an empire the most important lesson of all. True progress doesn't come from following the paths others have laid. It comes from the courage to question everything, the wisdom to learn from every failure, and the determination to never accept that anything is truly impossible. Humanity's greatest strength was never their technology. It was their absolute refusal to stop reaching for the stars, no matter how many times they were told they couldn't get there. And now, finally, the galaxy was learning to reach alongside them.